And today we are going to talk about shadows. It's important, in my opinion, when you're painting an item to ground the item if it's going to be something that's realistic. If it's an abstract, you know, the sky's the limit. You can do anything with an abstract. But if you are painting something that's representational, then you want to look at how to get effective shadows in order to ground your items to the surface that you're painting on. And these are principles that are going to be the same whether you're working in oil paints, acrylic paints, or watercolor paints. So what I have in front of me tonight is to introduce you to Pebio's new Origin line of acrylic paints. So Origin Acrylics, and I'll explain why it's called Origin Acrylics in just a few minutes. But I wanted to show you, this is some artwork that I did with those Origin Acrylics. And do you see the heavy shadow that I put here? That was to ground the orange to the tabletop here. Also, what's a little more subtle, so you can get bold with your shadows or you can get subtle with your shadows. And another subtle shadow is around this area and underneath here. And this shadow is actually a purple shadow. I mixed a heavy purple by using the blue tone and the magenta tone and got a heavy purple and put that in as the shadow. Hey there, Frankie Page on Whatnot. Welcome in, welcome in. And I see some other folks over on YouTube. Welcome in as well. And so I put the heavy purple here for the shadows on the tabletop because I wanted to anchor the oranges to the tabletop. But in this area right here, I wanted something a little more subtle. And so this is a brown underneath here that's mixed from the orange and the green. So there are some tricks to creating shadows. I like to create shadows not just with a black or a blue or a purple. In other words, I can get a tube like this of purple and just whip in a purple color in order to get my shadows. And that'll work. That works great. And I have done that. Let me show you one where I have done that. Let's see this one here. It wasn't purple, it was another color. But what I did here was I was using a palette knife, and instead of mixing a purple or a dark blue for my shadows here, I just whipped in some of the orange, the dark orange color, right in underneath here. Now, you'll notice that these shadows don't really ground the fruit to the surface. It's more impressionistic than it is realistic because I was working with just a palette knife and I wanted to get lots of texture in it. So I wasn't doing a lot of the things that I would do if I was painting with a brush. Okay, but you can see the effect of, okay, there I threw some shadows in and I used the same color pretty much as the darkest color on the oranges for that one. But this one, these are blood oranges. So if you're from Florida or you've bought oranges from Florida, then you'll know that blood oranges have a pinky red interior to them. They're not just orange, right? So these are little blood orange slices. And I have a more subtle shadow underneath here. I knew I was going to put this light blue as the background. And so I created a shadow that was taking the blue and adding just a little bit of the orange to it, just a little bit, in order to be able to create a muted color shadow. If you're working on the color wheel and you look at opposite colors on the color wheel, you'll notice that blue and orange are opposite each other on the color wheel. And so what that means is if you mix the blue and the orange together, and we'll do that together when we get over top of the table, you're going to get some version of a muted down version of the blue or a muted down version of the orange, depending on what the primary color is there that you were working with. And when I say primary, I don't mean primaries as in yellow, blue, and red. I mean the color that has the most in it. If I had 5 parts blue and say half of a part of orange, which is what? 1 part blue, 1 part orange to 10 parts blue, then I would have a subtle softening of that blue. And that's more what I did here to get this kind of shadow. And that is the trick, kind of in a nutshell. All right. When I do shadows, I incorporate this color and the bold color here together. I put this color and this color together, and that gives me a bold shadow. That, well, bold or even muted, depending on the proportions of the paints that I'm working with. And that is how I get shadows that work well together with the artwork, because they're using the same colors that are already in the artwork. So that is the trick to dynamic shadows, or shadows that are going to work well in your artwork, is work with the colors that you have in your artwork and mix those together. Like for instance on this one, where I wanted to get that brown to go underneath here, and I knew that if I took some of this green and some of this orange and mixed it together, I would get a muted brown color. Now, some of that knowledge comes from playing with paint. So you have to get out there, you have to play with paint, you have to mix the various colors together. And some days when I don't know what to paint, some days you sit down and you're like, what is my inspiration for today, right? Then sometimes just color mix, whether you're color mixing, like I said, with oil paints, acrylic paints, or watercolor paints, just color mix. Or if you are not confident in, well, what do I mix together? I'm sitting here with my paints. Which ones do I mix together? Search on the internet for color mixing acrylic, color mixing watercolor, and you'll find dozens of videos that will teach you about various ways to color mix. And that, once you get comfortable with color mixing, that's how you're going to discover how to create these dynamic shadows for your pieces, right? Woohoo! I love a good shadow. All right, let me see. I think I had one more piece to show you here. Yes. So this is a project that I did for Pebeo. I happen to still have the Pebeo logo up here from my demo earlier in the week. But this is a project, Florida Oranges, that I developed for Pebeo using this line of Origin paints. And they will be available. These paints that I'm going to show you today are going to be available through Dick Blick beginning in July. So that's why I'm comfortable showing them to you today. And so you can see here the pretty big shadow right in here, right? And that helps to ground these pieces. It also, the importance of the shadow as well is to tell you, the viewer, where the light source is. Because when the light is coming from over here, as it is in this piece, you can see right here is a highlight, and along here, like the top here, is some highlighting, right? Right here is some highlighting. What that tells you is the light is coming from up over here. And when the light is coming from here, that means the shadow naturally is going to be on the other side of your piece. Now, you could just draw an orange and not have any shadowing and not have any highlighting, but when you're first learning how to paint, a lot of times what you're shown is a ball. Okay, let's take a ball and let's determine where the light source is coming from the right, from the left, and then put a highlight on the ball. So you have a ball here, put a highlight on it, like I did here with this orange. You see that little highlight over here? That tells me the light is coming from over here. That means this side is going to be a little bit darker, right? More darkness over here and down here. So the light is coming from up above. Sometimes the light is coming from the sides. Sometimes you're underlit. You're coming from here. So the shadows do some different things on your background. And oftentimes you'll see videos when they're talking about learning about shadows, that you're going to create the ball and then you're going to have your highlight on the ball, and then you're going to be making the outside, the opposite side of that highlight is going to be darker, right? And then you're going to have a shadow coming off the ball. And all of that speaks to dimension, it speaks to light source, and it speaks to grounding. So those are the principles that you are going to invoke by creating the light source and then grounding your item onto its surface with a good shadow. All right. Hello there, Frederick T. Haim. Welcome in over on Whatnot. All right. Let me put this away. There is a video on Vimeo that Pebio has posted for this project that I did with an outliner. So when I write my article on my website for that, I will be sure to put a link to that video, and that way you'll be able to watch how to create your own oranges, Florida oranges, artwork, and that will help you to learn about this concept of light source, making something look dimensional, and the shadow. It's super easy, once you've run through it and you've done the steps. And so it's a 12-step process to make that project, but that will be available to you, and I will make sure that I show it to y'all when I write the article about it, because I want you to try the Origin acrylics. Let me tell you a little bit more about the Origin acrylics. The Origin acrylics from Pebio they have, how many colors were in I think it's 48 colors in the range, but of that, 23 of the colors are single pigment. What does that mean to you? It's funny because I just saw Dick Blick do a story or a post, a reel on Instagram, and they were talking about what are single pigments and why are they important. So paints that have one pigment in them and then the binder. So in this case, this has, let's see, the pigment, it tells you right here, is what, PY74? Yep. So this is PY74 is the pigment number. So there are standards for pigment numbers, and that's what pigment manufacturers came up with. So for instance, this yellow, which is, they're calling it primary yellow, it's a PY74. If you wanted to know specifically the chemical makeup of PY74, you could look it up on the internet, because chemical manufacturers have, this is a color code. The P stands for pigment, the Y stands for yellow. That means it's in the yellow pigment family. And then 74 is going to say specifically what kind of pigment that is. Now, what's significant for me is that there's only a single pigment in this jar. So it's a single yellow pigment. That comes in handy when you are color mixing, because what I found over the years with experience is it's better if you have at least one of the colors that you are color mixing with is a single pigment and is transparent, and that helps tremendously. So this is a transparent yellow single pigment, and which means that this yellow will mix beautifully. It'll mix beautiful greens and beautiful oranges when I'm mixing it with reds and I'm mixing it with blues. Now there's also another combination that I like to do using yellow, and that is to get an olive green. And the trick is you're going to combine it with black. So here's black. And when I combine yellow with black, I'm going to get an olive green. So I will be demonstrating that for you. And I like that combination for shadows when I'm doing something that is landscape, like landscaping. It makes a beautiful, beautiful olive green. And of course you can make it a darker olive or a lighter olive depending on how much yellow you put in and how much black you put in. And you only need a tiny bit of black in order to, because the black is very strong, in order to get the olive green out of it. Now let's take a look at, and Pebio's calling this primary yellow. Now let's take a look at the primary red right here. Primary red, and it says it's a monopigment. That means it's a single pigment. And it says PV19. So I have discussed pigments before on my channel, but because this is a new line of paints, I wanted to be sure that you understood the label. So here it's PV19. Well, why doesn't it say PR? Because PR is pigment red. What's PV? PV is pigment violet. So it's in the violet family, this particular pigment, and that's great for when we're going to color mix, because if you look into your printer and your printer has the various, I'm looking right now at my printer and I see stacked up all of my cartridges, what you've got is a yellow, a cyan, which is a type of blue, and a magenta. That magenta is not your typical red. The magenta is actually a deep, deep, deep pink. So it is in the violet, it's in the violet category as opposed to being in the red category. So you'll see the difference. Do I even have a red one here? I don't even think I have red. I'm looking going, I have red paint. I just don't have the red paint in the origin right now. But it's interesting when you look at that and you go, okay, it's a pigment violet. It has a red look to it. Let me actually open it up so you can see. Whew. But you see how, yeah, it's red, but it's actually a pinky red. And that's what you want for color mixing. And it is a single pigment, and it is transparent. You can tell it's transparent because right here, most paints will have on them a little block. This is even oil paints and everything. If there's a little block on there that talks about the transparency or opacity of it, if the block is black, it's opaque. If the block has a line through it, that means it's semi-opaque or semi-transparent. And if it has a white block like this, that means it's transparent. So what did I say? You want a single pigment transparent color to do your color mixing with. So I can confidently mix this primary red with a bunch of different colors that may actually have more than one color in them. They don't have to be single pigment. When you get above 3 or 4 pigments, when you're mixing colors, that's when you can start to get into muddy colors. And a lot of people, especially when they're new to painting, they're like, why does my paint always go muddy? Well, these are the reasons why. And I would encourage you to look for single pigments, transparent, to use as at least one of your mixing paints. Now let's look at the blue cyan, and it says PB, so I know it's a pigment blue, 15:3. So that is cyan. You'll see that color. The interesting thing is you can see that color code across different brands. So Pebio has it here on the front of their label, but another company, there's Golden, there's Liquitex, there's just Blick has their own line of acrylics, and they'll say on the label what the color code is. So you may have a Liquitex cyan blue, and then you'll have your Pebeo cyan blue. Now, they should, for the most part, operate the same way if they're both acrylics and they both have the same color pigment in them. Now, sometimes, though, the binders are a little bit different. So what you'll find is, for instance, this cyan coming out of the bottle is going to dry darker than what it looks like when it's wet. And the reason for that, and I've shown that many times before, but look at that. Oh, look how rich that color is. It's fabulous. But when it dries, it actually dries a little bit darker. And why is that? That's because it's a transparent color. See that? And so the transparent color is suspended in an acrylic medium. So you can buy just acrylic medium by itself, and you can combine it with powdered pigment and make your own paints if you want to. Now, let me show you a medium. I should have some right here. So this is acrylic medium by a company called Sargent Art. And notice that it's milky. It's milky. So when the acrylic medium, which is the base for acrylic paint, is wet, it's actually this white milky color. So that's why this color inside is going to look a little bit lighter because of the whiteness of the acrylic medium. And when it dries, it's going to dry a little bit darker. That's true of this one, the primary blue, the primary red, and the primary yellow. All right, so it's important, I feel like, when you first get colors, whether it's watercolors or acrylic colors or oil colors, to swatch your colors. And I've done workshops before about color swatching. So the reason for the color swatching is you'll be able to see with the swatches, what does the color look like when it's dry, as opposed to the paint coming straight out of the bottle. Hey, Keep It Glassy over on Whatnot. Welcome in, welcome in. And that's what I always do. I actually, again, I don't have it right here because I had to move everything out of my studio for the presentation on Wednesday. But I have made color swatches of these paints so I can see what the colors themselves look like and what the mixes look like when they're dry, because they're going to dry a little, they're going to darken a little bit when they dry, because that white medium that I had just shown you turns clear when it's dry. This is going to dry clear. It's just when it's wet it looks milky. All right, let's go ahead then over top of the table, and we'll get started with actually doing some color mixing and having some fun, and then I'll show you how to drop in some shadows. Now, this is the information about where you can find me on Instagram, Facebook, and remember I mentioned about my website where I publish the articles and I have links to the videos. So for instance, the workshop that I did on Wednesday with the leather painting, you would find that article and the video for it on my website here at deetsart.com. Let me bring it up a little bit closer for you if you want to take a picture of that. That tells you where to go to get to my various social media and websites. Now, on Whatnot, I sell my finished artwork, so finished greeting cards, finished matted art, that type of thing. And those are, you can peruse that artwork if you are on Whatnot during the show. All you have to do if you're on Whatnot is go to the little house at the bottom of the screen, down in the corner, and click and look under Buy Now, and you'll see a whole bunch of my artwork, like for instance these figs, and you can see the shadows that I dropped into the figs there. And that is an acrylic artwork, and it is available under the Buy Now on Whatnot. If you're on YouTube and you would like to take a look at what I have available for sale and participate in a giveaway at the end of the workshop. So at the end of the workshop, I'm going to give away the duck greeting card that I had available last week. And but Salmon's girl picked the chicken. So I have the duck for this week that I painted. And let's see. And also, if you're on YouTube and you want to take a look at my artwork, the finished artwork, already matted, ready to go. I love the chicken. Oh, good, you got it already. Did you get it already? I think you did, because I think I mailed it on Monday this past week, so you should have received it. And she was so cute, so cute. And then, so if you're on YouTube and you would like to come over and take a look at what I have available for finished artworks and participate in the auction after the workshop, just scan the QR code with your phone at the top of the screen, or you can go into the description of the video on YouTube and there'll be a link for you to join over on Whatnot. And if you've never been on Whatnot before, Whatnot is an auction platform, and Whatnot will give you, when you sign up, $15 to spend either in my shop or any other shop on Whatnot. So you definitely get a nice benefit. I remember when I first joined Whatnot, and those $15 sit in your wallet on Whatnot until you spend it. It was awesome. Thank you, Whatnot. Oh, all right. Let me move this out of the way. And let's get going. Now, this is some of the paper that we'll be working with. My favorite is the Canson XL watercolor paper, and it's 140 pounds. I love this paper because it's quite thick. Oh, look at me, I have paint holding it together. It's quite a thick paper, and it will take lots of water for watercolor, lots of paint for the acrylic paints. It's, to me, it's just a fantastic all around. And this size is a 9 by 12. You'll find that I work on a lot. And the reason that I work on the 9 by 12 a lot is because it fits perfectly into an 11 by 14 mat. And so that's why I generally work on the 9 by 12 size. But there's the Canson XL watercolor paper. And then this is the Canson XL mixed media paper. So the mixed media paper is only 98 pounds. It will take wet media, but I prefer to use the mixed media paper with acrylics and then use the Canson XL watercolor paper like this with watercolors. Now, can you go ahead and paint on canvas? Of course you can, because with the acrylic that we're going to be doing. And where did I put it? I have a whole pad here of canvas. So a lot of people don't know, besides buying canvases that are stretched around stretcher bars, you can also buy canvas. So this is an all media artist canvas, and here's where I was doing some modeling paste on the canvas. You can see the texture there. But this is actually a pad of gessoed canvas. It's just not stretched. So if you're learning how to paint with acrylics, you want to get the feel for what it's like to paint on a stretched canvas, but you either don't have the room for stretched canvas, or you don't have the you don't want to spend the money on loads of stretched canvases to begin with. Get yourself some of these pads, and they come in the 9 by 12, which would fit in an 11 by 14 mat as well. All I do is take some artist tape and I just tape it right into my 11 by 14 mat. So you don't have to have it as a stretched canvas on stretcher bars. And this is the perfect way when you're learning to work on canvas. It's just the best. But with acrylic, you absolutely can work on the mixed media paper, and you can work on the watercolor paper as well. So if you already have watercolor paper, then use that. Use what you have, right? Now, the other thing that I use a lot with acrylics is called a palette paper pad. So this is a pad, usually comes with 40 or 50 sheets on it. It's shiny on one side, and it is used for mixing your paints right on here. So let's start with that. I'm actually going to use, you can see in this mixed media that I was doing some, where'd it go? I must have torn it out. I was doing some color mixing in here before too. So let me show you some basic color mixes, and then how to take those color mixes and create shadows with them. So right now we're just doing the color mixing, okay? So let's take out some of the red, and oftentimes if there's paint in the lid here, I'll just pull it right out of the lid. So we're going to be mixing the red with blue and with yellow, right? So we're using these primary colors, beautiful single pigments. So they're going to give you just the colors that you expect. That's one of the things when they asked me to test the paints out, these Origin paints, and I was so excited because they give me the colors that I expect when I'm color mixing. And that's, you can't ask for more than that as an artist. Oh my gosh. Okay, here's the blue. I'll put out a little bit of blue here. All right. I always tend to use twice as much yellow as I do of my red or of my blue, because the red and the blue have a stronger tinting strength than the yellow does. Here we go with the yellow. Let's put the waters up here. Oh, hey, Fart Queen. Welcome in. Welcome in. There we go. All right. So I guess when I closed this, I traveled and did a demonstration for some folks with these paints. And when I traveled, I didn't do what I normally do. So do you see the edge of that? Let me see if I can do it without spilling it out. Yes. Okay. You can see the edge has lots of paint on it right there. What I normally do to prevent it from gluing itself together is I put Vaseline on the jar. So I keep a big thing of Vaseline in my studio, and normally when I'm finished with my paint, I take a paper towel. Let me get a fresh one to make this a little easier. I take a paper towel and I go around the top like this, and I get all of the, normally it's wet paint, right? If I've been painting, I've been doing a painting session. So normally I will pull all of the wet paint off of there. This happens to be dry because of the trip. Let's see here. We made a mess, didn't we? That means we had a good time. So I would take all of this off, normally before sealing it. We were in a hurry after the show was over. So let me get all of this out of here. Thank you for joining me on your Sunday evening. I appreciate you popping in and watching. Feel free to pop your questions in the chat if you have any questions about painting. Okay, there we go. Just about have all of that off of there. And once it's all off, now sometimes what I will also do is I will run my paper towel around the inside of the rim here as well, just to make sure that I get the paint off of the inside rim in addition, before I put on the Vaseline. So what I'm going to do here is I get out my Vaseline, get a generous amount of that on my hands, and then I go around the lip like this with the Vaseline. It's not going to hurt your paint because it shouldn't be falling in your paint. There we go. It's just going around the outside top here and the edges here, attempting to recreate the famous girl with pearl earring. Oh, Fart Queen. Wow. That's fun. Okay, here we go. I'm not much of a portraitist, so the I painted the terrace by At Night by Van Gogh a couple years ago. Fart Queen says, wow, that's cool. That's cool. Yes, I love the stroke work of Vincent van Gogh's work. It's very impressionistic, and that's the that's the type of painting I like to do. Okay, so I just put a layer of Vaseline all around the sides and the top. So now the next time I go to open this, it's going to open perfectly, and there won't be all of this going on around the outside of it. It'll open very easily. All right, let's take that back off of it. Let's get rid of that. All right, so much for my manicure, but that's what happens when you get elbow deep in paint, right? So let's get out some of the yellow. Oh, just stunning. Stunning! All right, there's what it looks like in the lid, like that. Let's close this back up. The next time it'll be super easy to open. Okay, so let's mix our some colors together. So let's take some yellow, like twice as much yellow as blue. And let's see what green we get here. Nice. Wow, that is beautiful, and it's quick. That's the thing. If you're using really good quality single pigment paints, you're going to get beautiful mixes, and they're going to be quick and effortless. So if you're watching somebody on the internet and they're mixing and their colors are coming out beautifully and it looks effortless, just know that they had to practice a lot in order to get the right combinations of paints to make that happen. And so here is a gorgeous, gorgeous, what I would call sap green or mid-tone green, just by using the yellow and that primary yellow, primary blue. Now that doesn't always happen. It depends on the brands of paint and whether the pigments within those brands of paint are single pigment or not. Now next, let's take this yellow and we're going to mix it with half as much of the red. So like I said, it actually looks more like a magenta. So half as much in order to get an orange. See, the red is the red and the blue are both very heavy on the pigment. And so that's how quickly you can get what's called a mid-tone orange. But I'm not mixing an equal part of yellow and an equal part of this red. I'm mixing 2 parts yellow and 1 part red in order to get what I would call a mid-tone orange there. All right, so remember how I showed you on the orange, and we're going to do it together shortly, but the way that I showed you on the orange, that I created some brown in order to put a shadow underneath the leaf. So I actually took a little bit of this orange and I added a little bit of green, and I said, okay, let's see what we get. Because the leaf is green and the orange is orange color. And so if you combine them together, you will get a more muted color. Now in this case, I used a lot of green. So you can see I've got an olive. And then when I do this with a little bit more orange, the more orange I add, the more toward brown it's going to go. And that gives you a great dynamic shadow. So that's a fantastic shadow color using the orange and the green together. I can just keep getting it darker by adding more of the orange. If I wanted it to be much darker, I could add just a teeny tiny touch of black. Let's do that. So I've got some Mars black here. If I add just a tiny, tiny bit of black, just a little bit, you don't need much in the way of black, then you're going to deepen the color even more. I always go with less first, and I can always add more. Like, okay, that deepened it a little bit, but what if I want to deepen it a little bit more? Just little bitty bits at a time, all right? Because all of a sudden your color is going to get too dark and you're going to go, what happened? Yeah, it doesn't take much, that tipping point. There we go. That is a beautiful, beautiful shadow color right there. And it was using those two colors. So when we do our oranges and we do that leaf part, you're going to see that. Okay. And then I want to do the blue and the red together. So this time I'm going to take an equal amount of blue and an equal amount of red because they're both very heavy staining type colors. Never tried that. George said, oh, hey, Sofa Tater, welcome in, welcome in. All right, so now we're going to put an equal amount of the red in with the blue. And what you're going to get is a very dark purple. Nice dark purple. Wow. Woo! Fantastic. I love the violet that you get with these two colors. So there's a beautiful violet color right there. Now, you can take that violet and make it a little more burgundy color by adding more red, or you can make it more of a blue violet by adding more blue. So I do that a lot. I play with that with my shadows. When I showed you this one before, here, what I did here was I created this purple. Hey, chicken from Athens, Georgia. Chick from Athens, Georgia. Welcome in, welcome in. Thanks for joining. We're talking about creating dynamic shadows in your artwork. So this purple, which is equal parts of the primary blue and the primary red, I use straight purple right underneath here, underneath these oranges to give a strong, strong shadow, that dark, dark purple. But I made that dark purple speak to the rest of the painting. Remember, this blue right here is the same blue that I'm using here, but with some white in it. So I used that blue and that red, which is what's on the tablecloth here, to create a purple for my shadow, and I dropped that in right here, the dark purple. And I dropped it in underneath the leaves over here as well to anchor them to the table. Now, after I put that purple on there, and then I was coating the rest of the area with the red that's here, the primary red, I did a light coat of primary red over this purple in order to tie that purple to the surface. So we can do that. Now, let me show you the where I get the olive green by using yellow and black. One of my favorite quick olive colors to drop in for dramatic shadows on landscapes. So here is, of course, the yellow. Let's get some yellow over here. And then I am going to pop just a little bit of black. Again, start with less, and then you can always add more. This is the Mars black. I'm adding it to the yellow. So I have about 4 parts yellow to 1 part black. And bam, there we go, olive green, just like that. And it makes a stunning olive green, y'all, stunning. So primary yellow, or any of your yellows, you can try various types of yellow with your black to get various types of olive green. Oh, I'm loving that green. Now if I want it to be, but that's not a shadow green. Let me add a little bit more black here in order to deepen it again, about the same amount of black. And it will deepen the color. And the funny thing is, if you look at this color, it's very similar to what we got over here when we put the orange and the green together. So there's more than one way to get at your olives and your browns. So there's a beautiful deep olive. And then if we add a little bit more black, So you can get these various versions of that olive green by using black and your yellows. Now it's getting a darker, like camo color. Oh, I love it. So that would make a good light shadow. And of course I would add a little bit more black. So there, I've got a beautiful, this is a beautiful camouflage green. And it was using the yellow and the black. So where lots of people say don't use black when you're painting, oftentimes if you take a college course or you take a class where someone's teaching you how to color mix, they're like, don't use black. I love using black when I know what it can do for me. So definitely experiment with your blacks in order so that you can find out what kind of color mixes you can get, because who knew that your Mars black and your primary yellow would make a camo green, which may be exactly the green that you want. Now there's another kind of black that you might see on the shelf. It's called ivory black. Now ivory black used to be created by burning ivory. Well, of course we don't do that anymore. So now it's called ivory black hue. It says HUE on there. Hue means it's a synthetic version of whatever the original ivory black was. So no, they don't burn ivory anymore, but they've created the same or a similar pigment in synthetic form to ivory black. The Mars black is more of a blue black, and the ivory black is more, which means it's a cool black. If you're going toward blue, you're going toward cooler colors. If you're going toward ivory black is a more brown black. It has a more of a warm undertone to it. So when you really get into painting a lot and you're thinking about cool colors and warm colors, that will answer the question of why do we have two blacks? Well, we have a cool black and we have a warm black. So let's do just a quickie little experiment and take the yellow here and add some of the warm black to it instead of the cool black and see if we get the same kind of green. I don't know. I haven't tried this because I just got my hands on the ivory black. So let's take a little bit of ivory black here. Ivory black also is supposed to be more transparent than Mars black. Wow. It tinted way faster, and is giving me a darker camo, just like that. So actually this ivory black, I can use less of the ivory black, but get a darker shadow going with the ivory black. So you can see why it's so important to play and color mix and see what your paints will do that you have on hand. So here, let me bring it up closer. This, which used the ivory black, is actually a deeper, warmer olive green than this camouflage here, which was done with the Mars black. Because if you're standing in the store and you see the two blacks, now you'll understand what they are. The ivory black tends more toward warm color and the Mars black tends more toward the cool color. And I've been painting for 20 years and I just learned that 2 weeks ago. Okay? So yes, you will continue to learn, hopefully, through your whole career. Now, another color combination that's very interesting that you can use for shadows as well is where you take purple and you add it to yellow. So that's actually how you can also make skin tones, is you can add a tiny bit of purple to your yellow and you'll get various shades of brown. Now right now I'm getting a various shade of green, so let's see if I add more purple to it. Okay. That's a dark. That's a dark shadow under somebody's chin. If you say you have a 5 o'clock shadow, that's the yellow and purple. It looks a little grayish brown. Let's add a little more yellow to it and see what we get. I'm looking to try to get more of a brown, but it's going green. So that purple and this primary yellow wants to go toward green instead of going toward brown. So there are other yellows besides PY74 in the collection. The particular yellow that I want to grab right now is, okay, come on, here it is. This is called yellow ochre. It's an earth type tone of yellow. And so what I'm going to do is put a little bit of that out. A lot of people, if you want to get very warm colors, use yellow ochre as their mixing yellow. So let's see what happens when we take yellow ochre and we add a little bit of this mixed purple to it. What happens? You should get sort of a brown shadow. Yes. Okay, now I'm getting something a little browner. Perfect. Dark skin tone right there. Okay. So using the yellow ochre with the purple, I'm getting a dark skin tone right there. Or a shadow on a lighter skin tone. So that is something else that you can do. Is I use purple a lot for shadows, and I'm either adding a little bit more blue to get a bluer purple, a little more red to get a redder burgundy type purple. I'm using some yellow in order to get sort of a tan, a dark brown tan color. And that's what I'm using when I'm doing portraiture type stuff. Now next week we're going to do whimsical portraits, and so we'll be doing a little bit more of the portrait type mixing. They're whimsical portraits because I'm not a portrait artist, okay? So we're going to have fun with crazy portraits next week. Okay, so those are some of the principles of the color mixing. Let's go ahead. And first off, I have this piece that I already have done. And these flowers are not grounded to the background. So this is acrylic paint, and it's not, they look like they're floating in space, right? So let's go ahead and ground these pieces and use some of the colors that we mixed up here in order to create shadows. So let me put this going this way. And then we have the artwork here. I just want to make sure that y'all can see that. It looks like you can. Okay, so instead of using my palette knife now, I'm going to go in. All right, I need to move this up just a little bit more. Let's move some of these out of the way. Move the water up a little bit more. There. So you can see it a little bit better. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a brush. I like to use this angled brush. You see the angle? It goes like this. And I like to use that brush because it gives me, I can do a very straight, kind of straight line, or I can cover a large area with it. And if I turn it like this, I can use the tip of it as well. So I find that comes in handy. So let's take this green, which was a combination of the yellow and the Mars black. And so it gives me a darker green. And let's come in here and add some darker green underneath here. And all I'm trying to do is ground the artwork to the background. That's the effect you're trying to get out of your shadows. A little bit around the leaves there. A little bit down here. So I'm just putting a little bit around the leaves. There's actually some sparkly color around the leaves, so I don't want to completely cover that. But what I'm doing is by putting the dark next to it, I'm grounding it on the surface. And remember, this is going to dry darker than what it looks like on the palette here where it's mixed. So I'm just going to add a little bit of darkness here, a little bit of darkness here, just to ground, give a little more dimension and ground the leaves to the background. And the funny thing is, when you look at this painting, let's say you're standing back. Hey, Gabriel Lee Arts again. Welcome in my Antique Passions. When you stand back and you look at the artwork, you're not going to realize that these shadows that you've just dropped in are grounding the subject to the background, but that's the effect that you get. And you're not going to consciously realize it, but as an artist, I know that that's what I have to do in order to ground these items to the background. And so from far away like this, you can already see that this flower is much more, it pops more off of the surface, and that's because I've put a shadow around it to ground it. Let me bring it up close. So the shadow doesn't look like much when you look at it close, but the effect is more from far away in order to make that pop. So let me just do the other few here. Let's see. So now I'm turning my brush, so I'm just using the tip if I only want to get a little bit of paint in there. And be a little more precise. There we go. And then on this flower, I'm going to drop in a shadow around the sides here. Now the light is coming from over here, I have determined, which is why I'm putting a shadow on that side of the leaves, assuming the light source is up here. So that helps too. You don't want to drop a shadow on one side of a leaf on one part of your painting and then drop the shadow in a different, like the light is coming from a different angle. That will confuse your viewer. So it is important that your shadows are coming from a consistent direction when it comes to the lighting. Okay, there it goes. This one here. This little one here. Nice. So it's just grounding. And I'm using that olive green since the painting is has green in the background as well. Okay. And because I've mixed this color right now, I need to use the whole thing, because if I don't do the whole thing, when I go to remix a color, I'm not going to have the same color again for the shadows. So I wanted to sort of make sure that all of this is tied together. Okay, cool. Let's drop a little bit more in there. Beginning to look good. It just adds that extra dimension. All right. There we go. So it's going to, like I said, up close, it may look kind of weird the way the shadows are going, but when you take it far away, that's when it makes things pop. So those are some tricks for how to pop in those shadows and make it work for you. Let's do that. This one's going to have some over here. Not a lot. This one we're going to have some coming down this way. Light source over here. Some coming this way. A little bit along the side there. Here, a little down here. Whoop. This one is a bud down here, so I'm just going to put a little bit around the bud, the base of the bud, around this leaf here, and this side of the leaf here. This side of this leaf here. Nice. Okay. So now you've got shadows dropped in there so that it actually makes the flowers grounded to the background and it makes them pop out to the front. Yes. I love the way that came out. Oh, thanks, Salmon's Girl. She said, nice. And that is just a trick, right? That's an artist trick. So now you'll know to look for that artist trick when you're looking at sort of landscapes and items that have a light source. You'll be looking for that light source. Just pretty this up just a little bit more. A little bit around here, just a little. All right, cool. So I'm going to go ahead and put that away, and we're going to work on an orange together. Okay, so that's going away. I'm going to use this mixed media paper right here and make sure that it is in the picture. Okay, I'm going to clean out my brush. So let's start out like this. And when I clean out my brush, I go ahead and get as much color out as I can before I dip it in water. And then I get more color out, and then I dip it in water. I try to do this so I get as much color out of the brush as I can before I put it in the water and swish it around to get the pigment out. And that way, the pigment here goes down into the trash and gets disposed of rather than having it going down into your water supply. You want as little artist pigments going down into your water supply as possible. So let me show you this water. You can see there's hardly any pigment coming out of there now, because I wiped most of the pigment off in my paper towel. So that is, it's good to Mother Gaia, Mother Earth, if you do that. All right. We are going to do an orange. What I like to do is I like to start with my palette knife, and because I like texture. So I am going to take, remember this orange that we made earlier? Actually, let's make some more orange. So I'm going to use the yellow and some of the magenta here. And we're going to get the orange going. So when I build up an orange, I build it up in 4 layers usually. So the first layer is what I call the mid-tone layer. I cover the whole orange in the mid-tone layer. Then I'm going to add the highlights or the lighter version. And then I'm going to come back in and I'm going to put in the shadows with the darkest version. So in order to get a lighter version, I just add more yellow. In order to get a darker version, I just add more red. So right now we're looking at something sort of a mid-tone orange. Just move these over here. Now I could have used the yellow ochre, right, with some of this red. Actually, let's do that so you can see the difference here. Here's some of the yellow ochre. And we can put that in with the red and see what happens. So I've got, ooh, that looks like an orange shadow, actually. That gives me a sort of a duller version. Let me see if I can get that on the screen for y'all. It gave me sort of a duller version of an orange, which means I would be able to use that as sort of a shadow for the orange if I wanted to. Okay, but right now we're just going to build the mid-tones of the orange. So let me just pick a spot here. I'm going to create sort of an orange. Like this. Like I said, I like having texture in my artwork, so I'm going to build the orange like this. And using the palette knife. Now normally I'll turn my artwork around. Some people are like, no, don't turn the artwork around. You should work all from one direction. I don't do that. I turn my artwork around. So there is an orange, and we've put in the mid-tone. Let's do this. I sort of cover the whole thing there. the nice thing about acrylics, and I wouldn't do this with watercolor. With watercolor, I would start with the lightest color first and then build my layers of color around it coming up. But when you work with acrylics, you can put a light color on top of here, as well as you can put a dark color on top of here. It'll work either way. So let's just make sure I've covered up those areas. And I have a little bit of texture in there. Okay, good. Nice. So that is the mid-tone orange. Now let me create the leaf. So I'm taking the green that we created, and how did we do that? We used some of the blue and some of the yellow, and we got this beautiful green. You'll see when it goes on the paper. Actually, let me see if I can bring you a little bit closer. Will it work? Will it work? Yes. Okay, cool. Bringing you a little closer. And so I've got some of the green on here that we mixed with the blue and the yellow. So I'm just going to create a sort of the outline of a leaf right here. See my Florida orange, right? So we're just creating a leaf. I can go back in with my brush and perfect it if I want to. Like, I kind of like to build the texture. That's why I like to use a palette knife. But here, because of the angle, I'm going to go ahead and use the brush to get the edges of it the way I want. Okay, there we go. Good texture there. So again, this is I'm putting in the mid-tone of the green. Now with the green, I'm going to be building a darker green and a lighter green on top of there. But I start with that mid-tone. Let's put some of that back on there. Now, how do I get a lighter green? I add a little more yellow. How do I get a darker green? I add a little bit more blue. So just like with the orange, I get a darker orange by adding a little more red, and I get a lighter orange by adding more yellow, right? Super easy. Okay. Now, before I go on this area to create the stem, I want to dry this a little bit more because I'm putting it on kind of thick, right? So I use a heat tool, which if you don't have one, you can find a link to one under my supply links on my website. So let me just get this area right here. What I'm trying to do is get this area of the orange right there dried so that I can put the green over top of it and not have the two mixed together. Okay, there we go. Now I've got green on here. I can pick up a little bit more green there, and we're going to create the stem right here. And where the stem meets the orange, there's a little bit of, it spreads out a little bit. There are actually dimples in the orange right there usually. So there's kind of a little star there. Do you see the little star? Yes. Okay. So that is just our mid-tone green. Now we are going to be coming in and making it, what, a little bit browner, right? Because the stem is actually more brown. Plus there's going to be brown down here underneath for the shadow. And we get the brown by taking the green and adding some orange. So let me just, there's a little bit of orange left on here. So let me bring it over here. And now I've got a little bit more brown. Let's add some more orange. So let me bring that up so you can see. So that's the green with some of the orange in it. I actually need to make a little bit more orange. I have some orange and yellow here. I'll put that in with it. Let's mix that together. Okay. Let's mix a little, I'm going to take a little bit of this sort of darker orange here. So when I'm painting, I'm just it helps to have knowledge of color mixing so that you can grab for your different from your different piles here and get the colors that you're looking for. So this one I'm going to use to drop in at the bottom here and create sort of a shadow on that green. Just layering it so that it has a little bit, it has green, but it's going to have a little more of a brown tint to the green. Okay, so I added a little bit of brown to that. So it doesn't just look bright green. It looks a little more realistic there when you do this layering process. All right, for the leaf, I want to have some lighter green and some darker green. So the lighter green is actually going to be out here near the tip. So I'm going to pick up a little bit of the yellow and a little bit of the green. And I'm going to get a lighter green. There we go. Like a lime green. Oh, I love that. Love that. It's kind of like a lime green, you see it? So I'm going to take that lime green and I'm going to bring it out here. And I'm going to put it over top of some of the green that's already there. And then I'm going to add a little bit more blue in. So I'm going to notice I'm what I call double dipping. Okay, so now I'm going to add some blue. And that's going to make it a darker green. Add a little bit more blue to it. Okay, so now we have a darker green, and I'm going to bring the darker green in sort of to the middle here to create the, you see the little line down the middle of the orange there, lighting-wise? And I'm going to create a bit of a shadow from there. So what you're doing is just building some dimension by going lighter and going darker. So it's the same principle as creating your shadows, going lighter and darker. So now I've got 3 colors on that leaf. Now normally I would let it dry because remember the colors are going to get darker as they dry, right? And then I'll go back in and I'll make more adjustments. If I need more light, if I need more dark, that kind of thing, I will do that. And I have more of the dark green on here. I'm just going to drop a bit of a shadow down here with that. Okay, now with this dark green, I will create a shadow for the orange, but I'm not going to do it until after I've added the highlights and the dark colors to the orange. So let me clean off my brush and let's do the lighter color on the orange. So if you look here at this one, the light color is over here. That means it's going to be dark over here, and that's why the shadow goes in that direction, because the color is coming from over here. And so let me get the green off of there. You know what, I think I'm going to use a different brush. Let's just use a different brush. Okay. So I've got a different brush, and we're going to have to mix up some more of that orange. So that's a little bit of the red and a whole lot of yellow. I think I'm going to have to put more. There's our orange. And now let me add some more yellow to it. So I get a lighter, almost yellow. There we go. So there's a lighter orange that's almost yellow. And I'm going to take that, and the light is coming from here. So I'm going to drop that in right here. Now because I used a palette knife to add the first layer of orange, I'm going to show you there's a whole bunch of texture right there because I built texture with the palette knife when I laid down the first layer. If I had used a brush to put the first layer down. I might not have that much texture going on there. Okay, so I'm going to bring in a light on this part here. And normally what you'll find is there's also a little bit of light over here as well. It's like a reflected light. And I'm going to bring it around like this so that you're giving your piece dimension by creating that sort of a circle around there. Okay. So there is a lighter orange. Now, it's not as light as I want it, so I'm actually going to pick up some more of the yellow here and just put it on my brush, so I'll have a lot more yellow. And you'll even see here that I came in with a bunch of yellow in order to get the highest highlights. Because I have two layers here now. I have the mid-tone orange and the light orange, but I like more punch than that. So now what I'm doing is a technique called dragging or dry brushing, where I've got the paint on the brush here and I'm holding it almost at the same perpendicular to the paper and bringing it across the surface. And if your painting has texture in it, when you do that, it will pick up the texture. Yay, so we're getting some good texture going. Going a little bit more in here. Ooh, yes. And there's some more texture over here, so it's picking that up. And let's put just a little bit back here. The nice thing about working with acrylics is that if you decide that you went too far in one direction or another, you could just paint right over top of it when it's dry. So it's just layer, 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 layer. You don't have to worry, are you getting it perfect on each layer? But now you can begin to see some dimension develop in this orange because we've got our highlights over here. Most of the rest of it looks flat because it's mid-tone, right? We've got the mid-tone. So now that I've got some highlights, I actually want to do just a little more highlight down here. Just a little bit more. And I'm just dragging it along that surface so that it will pick up all of that beautiful texture. Yes, give me texture. Okay, cool. So let me see if you can see the texture right there. Oh my gosh, the texture is so cool. All right, then I'm going to mix a darker version of the orange because I want to have a shadow over here, right? There's a shadow here underneath the leaf. There's a shadow down here. So let's get the orange. Let's see if my orange is still wet. No, it's not. Okay, so we need a little bit more red and a little bit more yellow. And now what I'm doing is I'm creating a very dark orange. I'm using more of the red with the yellow than I did before. So now I've got a darker version of the orange. Now I can come in and I can drop in my darkest, what I call my darkest darks. So now I've got my darkest darks coming in. And again, if I drag it along, I'm going to pick up the texture. So my darkest darks. So what that does is it begins to give the orange dimension, right? It's giving it dimension. Now, I'm looking going, oh, I want more dark. More dark! So since I want more dark, remember these colors are transparent, right? So if I put some of just this magenta or this primary red on there, what's going to happen is when it dries, it's going to become somewhat transparent if I put it on in a thin coat. and then the orange from underneath is going to show through. So I haven't made any orange right now. I'm just working with a thin, thin, thin layer of the red. And I'm coming in here, I'm just touching it. I want to deepen it. So it's not an apple, it is an orange, but the beautiful thing is that when this red dries, it's transparent, and so the orange is going to show through. That's why it's important to know whether your paints are transparent or whether they're opaque, the colors. Because if they're transparent, then you know when they dry, the under layer colors are going to show through. So it still gives me a nice, brilliant orange. Now I'm going to put a little bit of water on my brush because I find with these paints, in particular the Origin acrylics, that they tend to, when you work with them, they tend to work dry. So I'm constantly wetting my brush. So here we go. I'm just adding a little bit more of wetness to it. There we go. So now we've got a lot more dimension to that because we've got a dark version here, a light version here, and a mid-tone up in here. Okay. Now I do want to create a kind of a browny shadow to go in here and right underneath here where that leaf is going to cast a shadow. So let's do the shadow with, in this case, I like the color of orange that was created by this yellow ochre and the red. So it's a little bit of a muted, it's a muted orange instead of being a brilliant orange, which is what was created with that primary yellow. So let's drop some of that in and see what happens. Okay, it's not brown enough for me. All right. It has a bit of a red tint to it. It is a shadow, but it has a red tint to it. So what I'm going to do is throw a little bit of green in with it. Remember I said if you take the orange and you take a green and you put them together, you're going to get a brown. So let's take some of the green right here. And I'm going to mix that together with this orange that I made with the primary red and the yellow ochre, this color. So here we go. And that gives me a nice shadow. There we go. So this is the color right here. It's a shadow color. Now I can come in here and I could pop it. Yeah, now you're talking shadow. Come on, shadows. So there's much more of a shadow. But because it's made from an orange and a green, orange and green, it's going to speak well to your subject. That's how you get your dynamic shadows in here. Now what I'm doing is adding some shadowing around where that stem meets the orange, because where the stem meets the orange, there's usually a little dent, right in that spot. So we want to create the illusion of a little bit of a shadow there to make it look like it's sort of growing out of a dent in the orange. This is a little bit large brush for what I'm doing right now, but that's okay. I can make it work. Okay, so that is a little bit too brown, but while it's still wet, I can take another brush, a detail brush like this. This has a little tip to it. I can get it wet. And while this paint is still somewhat wet, I can work back into it and soften the edges and soften the effect a little bit. Now you can do this with acrylics, and you can do this also with watercolors. Watercolors are not permanent. They will relift. And so you can do this also with watercolors. And what I'm doing is just softening the brown areas around there so it doesn't look too much like a harsh circle right around there. And I'll bring it up to the camera and show you in just a second. This softens the edges. Okay. Now I can also pick up some of it like this if it's wet. There you go. I just make sure that I'm constantly turning my paper towel so that I don't get re-darken an area that I didn't want to darken. Okay. So there is a little bit of darkness right here where there should be lightness, right? So what am I going to do? I'm just going to grab some of the yellow. And I'm just going to reapply yellow right over top of that. There we go. And that will fix where the some brown dot where it didn't belong. Okay, so there's the concept. You've got an orange going, you've got your lightest light where the light source is hitting, and then you've got your darkest dark down here. Actually, for the darkest dark, I'm going to take some of this orange that was made with the yellow ochre, and I'm just going to come down here and just add a little bit of that and just feather it out in this back area right here, because this is going to be the darkest dark. There we go. Okay, so now you've got a little bit darker there. Now comes the shadow for the orange itself. So here, in this one, what I did, like I said, I made a purple, and then I made a magenta color, the primary red color tablecloth for it. So before I put the tablecloth down for the orange, I'm actually going to create the shadow first. And the reason for that is I want to tie together, and that's what I do on all of these. Even when you watch, if you watch this presentation of how I did these oranges, I dropped in these shadows first, and then I put in the background. So you want to drop your shadows in first. So what I'm going to do here is this purple has dried. So I'm actually going to go to a fresh page here. And let's make ourselves some purple. I'm going to clean out these brushes. Clean that brush, clean this brush. And still art. Hi there, Isaac Poshman. Yes, still art. At about 7:35, we'll start with the giveaway and the auction. We're almost done with the orange project. All right. So usually my art classes are between an hour and a half and 2 hours and 10 minutes. There we go. And then let's create some purple that we're going to put back here. And the reason that I'm putting purple back there is because I'm going, this particular piece, I'm going to be creating a horizon, like a tabletop, for it to be sitting on. With these pieces, I didn't even create a tabletop. I just sort of anchored it to the background. And the same is true with the blood oranges. I just anchored them to the background. So if I were just anchoring this to the background, this is where I took the blue and some of this sort of reddy orange, and I created the shadow down below here. But because we're going to be putting the orange on a magenta background or primary red background, and we're going to put blue up here in the air behind it, I'm going to use the blue and the red to create my purple shadow. So you're always looking at what's around. Now, if I didn't want to create a purple shadow, remember we created purple with the primary red and the primary blue, but hey, I could just get purple right out of the tube, right? This is called a convenience color, meaning I don't have to mix it. I could just pull it right out of the tube. Oops, that's the ultramarine blue. Where's the other pretty purple that I like here? Hold on, hold on. I moved it. Okay, this is called violet cobalt, dark cobalt violet hue. Now remember what I told you, if it says hue, that means it's not actually cobalt in there. Don't worry. You're safe. But this is a nice purple. So knowing that the blue and the red will create a purple, I can use purple for the shadow. I can either mix the purple or I can just use purple straight out of the tube. So I'll show you both. So here is the purple straight out of the tube like that. And then I had shown you earlier, if we mix a little bit of magenta and we mix that with the blue like this. Right. I'm just getting the magenta off of my palette knife here. And then I take some blue and I can mix a dark purple as well. Ooh, there's a lot more blue in this one. Okay, I have to put a little bit more red in there to get a purple, don't I? Now there's also, this is another the Studio Acrylics from Pebeo, and there's a beautiful purple as well. Now this purple tends toward red, where this purple tends toward blue, meaning there's a little bit more blue in one and a little bit more red in the other. But I can mix my own here. I'm just adding a little bit more of the red to it, so I can get a violet. Not quite yet. It's still very blue. Okay, come on. Come on. Red. There we go. Now I've got a violet. But what I notice here is when I mix the two colors, the two primaries, I get a dark violet, dark violet, and out of the tube I've got a little bit lighter version of the violet. So either one will work. Let's put the darker violet that I mixed close to the orange, and then we'll use, when I do a shadow, I usually do two versions of the shadow. I do the darkest right next to the object, and then I do a lighter version a little bit further out. So let's just use a brush here, my favorite angle brush. This is the darker color that I mixed. So let's just take this, and we're just going to come here, and it's a round object. So because it's round, we want a shadow that has a loop to it, a loop-de-loop there. You'll have to look at what are called still lifes. That means actually take an orange or take a peach or a cherry and put a light source over here so that you can see what does it look, how big is the shadow. Partly it depends on how bright that light source is, how far the shadow goes back behind it. But there is the purple that I mixed, which is a beautiful dark purple right there. And then let's use the purple that came out of the tube next. So let me get this off here so that we can take the purple right out of the tube, which should be a lighter purple. So like I said, when I do my shadows, I'll usually do a double shadow. So here's a little bit lighter purple, yeah. There we go. So you'll see in just a second that the lighter purple, you've got the darkest dark next to the fruit, and then you've got this fun lighter purple here. Oh yeah, that is fun. That is fun. Okay, so now you've got your dark, dark, dark right next to the fruit, and then you've got a lighter purple here. That is so fun. Okay, so let's go ahead now. I'm going to use a bigger brush actually for the top of the table. And I want my bigger brush. Uh, let's see, where's the one that I really like a lot? I like this one for a big brush. This is a Princeton, I think, right? Yeah, Princeton Summit, they call it. But it's a nice 1 inch big, and I like it because it has this angled back to it. And you can scratch into your artwork with this hard back and get some really cool texture going. Okay, so as this is drying, you can really see the double shadow right there. And oh, we need to put some pink on here, don't we? Oopsies. Let's get some of this. Now the shadow is not going to be in midair, is it? The shadow is going to be sitting on the tabletop. So when I put my tabletop in, let me start with a line for the tabletop. So I'm just using a smaller brush to put the tabletop on there. There we go. So I could put the tabletop anywhere, right? I could put the tabletop up here. I could put the table, but it does have to be above where the shadow is, because the shadow is shadowing on top of the tabletop, isn't it? Okay, then I'm going to turn it around here so I can continue the tabletop at the same level. Now, if you don't know, if you're not good with that, you can use this as a guide. And then I'm not actually touching the ruler. I'm just going along, sort of along the edge in that direction, just so I can get a feel for where the top of that table is. There we go. Look at that. Okay, there. So now we've got a somewhat straight tabletop. Right. Oh, it actually goes off at an angle, but I really don't care. I don't care. It's art. Since it's art, we can do whatever we want, right? I mean, I could have a totally wonky, crazy background. Okay, now what I'm going to do with my big brush is I'm going to get the brush wet first. So I have two waters here. I have a dirty water and a clean water. So right now I'm getting my brush wet in a clean water. And I don't want it soaking, but I do want it to be somewhat wet. I want it to be damp. And then I'm going to pick up this color. Oh, I can pick it up from the lid. And first I'm going to put some out. And then I'm going to put it over top of the shadow. Why am I going over top of the shadow? Because remember, this primary red is transparent. So I can tie it to the tabletop very nicely by going right over top of that shadow, and it helps to integrate the shadow with the artwork. Now, if I were using an opaque color on top of the table, I would not go over top of it. I wouldn't go over top of the shadow, because if I did, I would lose the shadow with an opaque paint, right? But because I know this color is transparent, I was able to go over the top of it. Okay, all right, so let's lay this in. Now, since I know that the sun, or the light source, is coming from over here, I may even add just a touch of white to my background. And put that over here in front of the orange. Now right now, because I didn't wait for the background shadow here to fully dry, it's actually the wetness is pulling some of it up. but that's okay. It's just integrating it with the tabletop, which is fine. Okay, there you go. You see that? And that's sort of what happened here as well. I'm integrating it with the tabletop. Okay. And then you can always remember layer, layer, layer. So you can always go back in and perfect your shadow if you wanted to change it. But if I want to get a little bit of luminosity going over here in front of the orange because the light source is on the table. Hey, Mr. Fly, what are you doing here? You see there's a little fly came to join us. And it's because it's raining out. So they come inside. Okay, so I would just take, what I like to use is not just white. I like to use a color called iridescent white. So iridescent white still has like a little bit of, has a little shimmer to it because I love shimmer, right? So I'm just going to put a tiny bit of iridescent white down here. Come on, iridescent white. Oh, I got some purple on it. Let's get that off of there before I close it. So what I'm going to do with my brush is I'm just going to pick up a tiny bit of that iridescent white. Tiny, tiny bit. And then I'm just going to drop it right here, sort of in front of the orange. Because that's where my light source is coming from, is right here. So I want you're going to work with your highlights and your shadows, right? So I've got some highlighting going on here in the front. It may be hard, hello, it may be hard for you to see in this lighting, but I like to build up my shadows and my highlights slowly so that I can adjust them the way I want as I go. Now I can see that the edge of the table right here can use just a little more highlighting. There we go. Highlight, highlight, highlight. Oh, that's fun. And if it's too much highlight, you're just going to come in with another layer of your primary red afterwards if you determine that it's too much. Okay, there we go. Sort of get it going down a little bit. Yay! Okay, so we've got a beautiful dramatic shadow here. We've got some shadowing in the back here that we did just by deepening our colors. We've got some shadowing here from the leaf onto the surface of the orange. All good. Now let's put the background in. And the background I'm going to do with the blue. Ah, it's nice. I can see it in the on YouTube there. You can see that little bit of iridescent adds that shimmer to this part of it right here. Yay! Okay, so now we're going to go with the background, and I'm going to go with a different brush. Ah! So let me grab this brush right here. Nice big one. And for the background, I'm going to do some of the primary blue, but I'm going to add a bunch of regular white to the primary blue. Remember, the primary blue dries darker, right? These colors, if they're transparent, they tend to dry darker. So you're going to need lots of white with it, tons of white with it. So let's get some of the white. This is titanium white, and I'm going to put lots of white in with the blue because I'm looking for just a very light blue. Now, when you're doing a background, like say, we're going to treat this like it's sky, okay? So I'm in say, landscape. What you want with the landscape is you want darker blue at the top, and then your lightest blue right here next to where it meets whatever the surface is. And so we're going to do that with this. I'm going to do a little bit darker blue at the top. So you can see here I'm mixing the darker blue color. I didn't bring too much of the white in. And I'm going to put that across the top here. And then I'm going to successively, as I move down the page, I'm going to get lighter. and that will give you the feeling of perspective, right? Perspective. And that's what you do with landscapes all the time. You don't always do that with what's called a still life, which is what we're working on right now. You don't always have to use perspective in the background of a still life, but I just wanted to, since we're talking about a blue background, give you some perception, give you a little bit of information about that. Okay, so we've got a darker blue up here. I'm going to add more whites. So now we've got a lighter blue, and I'm going to bring the lighter blue in and sort of blend them together. Now I'm just going very lightly over top of the dark blue. Remember that the white causes the blue to become more opaque. So I don't want to completely cover that layer that's up at the top. I just want to integrate it by doing a little bit of brushing over top of it. Can you see that? There's a little bit of brushing over the top of it so that I can sort of create my gradient and tie that dark, dark blue in with this next color blue. And successively, as I move down, I'm going to add more whites. Let's get this one here, around the leaf like that. Remember, it's going to look really light blue when you first put it down, and then it's going to get a little bit darker as it dries. But you know, I know, and now you know that as it dries, if you don't like the outcome, it's just another layer. It's a beautiful thing with acrylic. Just another layer. You can go right back over top of it and make any adjustments you want. Coming in here like this. It's a little bit too light right there, so I'm going to bring a little bit more blue into there. And then I'm going to add more white, so it's just a very, very blush, because I want a super blush blue. Oh, that's even too blue. Let's see if we can get more blushy down here. So your lightest blue should be right down along this this part right here, where you're meeting the tabletop. The reason I'm using blue in the background and not another color is because blue is opposite of orange on the color wheel. So when you mix orange and blue together, you get sort of a muddy color. But when you put them next to each other, ooh, they like that. They like that a lot when they're put next to each other. All right, so this is the blush blue right here. Very, very light. Okay. And as I go up, I'm going to add a little bit more of the blue in with it. Darken it a little bit. There we go. Oh, that's so fun. All right. There we go. So now I've got a gradient that goes from a light, light, light blue up to a darker blue in the background. And when I do areas like this that are tight, you see the tightness of that space, then I will come back in and grab this little brush and do that area right there. There we go. I'll bring in the little brush and just pull this in like this. So normally when I'm doing the area right next to the orange, I bring in a smaller brush to do that. Okay, I'm just looking to see if there are any other questions that have shown up, because we are just about done with this. So we're going to do the giveaway in just a moment. There it is. So we've got that blue in there. And that's where I bring the brush in and then I clean up the small brush and I clean up the edges. But you know, you can always come back, change things, change colors, fix things. That's the beauty of acrylic, right? Let's see here, we've got a little bit of an area there. Now the funny thing is I just did a correction right here. And so you can see it looks lighter than this area here, but when it dries, it's going to dry to the same color because it's going to dry darker. There are little bitty bits in there. All right. So the orange will, because the orange is an orange color, it looks good against a blue background. Okay, there you are. So that's the concepts for creating shadows both on your objects and a shadow on your surface when you're doing an item that's supposed to be grounded. Oh, Isaac Poshman says, thank you for teaching. Love it. Thank you, Isaac. I appreciate that. Yeah, I'm an art teacher by heart, so I decided to sort of take advantage of the art community that's over on Whatnot and teach. And then do a simulcast over onto YouTube so that it can be saved forever on YouTube. And then on Whatnot, the workshops are saved to my past shows and they stay on there. I believe it's either 60 days or 90 days. So if you miss something or you want to refresh your memory, you can always do that either on YouTube or on Poshmark. What am I saying? YouTube or Whatnot, thank you, by looking in the past shows. On YouTube, you'll find the past shows under the live tab because these are being live streamed on YouTube. And so after the fact, I take out the giveaway and the auction and then save just the lesson on YouTube. All right. So that was creating your shadows on your items.